If he dies on the street, that's not my liability. My liability ends at the property line. That was the sentence that made the air in my courtroom turn into ice. I have sat on this bench in Providence for nearly 40 years. I have heard excuses that would make you laugh, and I have heard tragedies that would break your heart. I have seen good people make bad mistakes, and I have seen bad people try to hide behind expensive lawyers, but I had never heard a human being speak about another person like they were expired milk in a grocery store until today. I am Judge Daniel Harper, and in this room we don't just look at the law, we look at the life behind the law. But the man standing before me didn't care about life. He cared about square footage, he cared about market value, and he cared about time, specifically how much of it I was wasting. His name was Victor Hale. He was a real estate developer who had been buying up old buildings in the city, turning them into what he called luxury living experiences. He was 45 years old, but he carried himself like a man who owned the sun and was charging people rent for the light. He wore a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, the kind of suit that whispers money when you move. On his wrist was a gold watch, heavy and shining under the fluorescent lights. He stood at the defendant's table, tapping a pen against his leather briefcase, a rhythm of impatience. Tap, tap, tap. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at the clerk, and he certainly wasn't looking at the man sitting 5 feet away from him. That man was Samuel Carter. Samuel was 82 years old. He didn't have a briefcase. He had a plastic bag with some papers inside. He didn't have a suit. He wore a faded olive green field jacket, the kind they issued in the Army decades ago. The patches were gone, leaving darker squares on the fabric where rank used to be. But on his collar, there was a small, tarnished pin of the 1st Infantry Division. His hands shook a constant rhythmic tremor that made the paper in his hand rustle like dry leaves. He sat hunched over, staring at the floor as if he was trying to take up as little space as possible in a world that had suddenly decided he didn't belong. The clerk's voice broke the silence, but it sounded hesitant, like she didn't want to start what was coming. Case number 4492 CV, Hale Properties versus Samuel Carter, eviction proceedings and claim for back damages. I adjusted my glasses and looked down at the file. It was thick, too thick for a simple eviction. I looked up. "Good morning, gentlemen." Samuel Carter tried to stand up. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white, his legs shaking as he fought gravity. It took him 5 seconds just to straighten his back. "Good morning, Your Honor," he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel, worn down by years of silence. Victor Hale didn't stand. He just leaned into the microphone, checking his manicured fingernails. "Morning, Judge. Look, my lawyer filed the expedited motion. This is an open NSH shut case. Can we wrap this up? I have a contractor meeting at 11 Mardur." The gallery shifted. A low murmur of disapproval rippled through the back rows. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest, the heat that comes when someone mistakes a courtroom for a drive-through window. I leaned forward, clasping my hands. "Mr. Hale," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "In this room we stand when the case is called, not because of me, but out of respect for the institution." And looking at Mr. Carter, who was standing despite clearly being in pain, "I suggest you find the strength in your legs to do the same." Hale stopped tapping his pen. He looked at me for the first time, his eyes cold and calculating. He let out a sigh loud enough for the microphone to pick up and slowly rose to his feet. He buttoned his jacket with a sharp snap. "Fine, I'm standing. Are we happy?" "We are not happy, Mr. Hale," I said. "We are proceeding." I opened the file. "The complaint states that you are evicting Mr. Carter from the apartment at 402 Elm Street. It says here he has lived there for 30 years. Hale nodded, bored. 32 years. He was on a legacy lease, rent control. I bought the building 6 months ago. I'm renovating. Everyone else took the buyout and left. He refused. Now he's violating the new lease terms. He has to go." "Violating the lease?" I asked. "How?" Hale pointed a finger at Samuel without looking at him. "He's creating a nuisance. He's hoarding. And he has an unauthorized animal on the premises. A dog. My buildings are strictly no-pet zones. It reduces property value. I gave him a notice to cure. He didn't get rid of the dog. So he's out." I looked at Samuel. The old man was still standing, swaying slightly. "Mr. Carter," I said gently. "You can sit down, sir." Samuel sank back into his chair with relief. Thank you, sir. Mr. Carter, I asked. You heard Mr. Hale? He says you have a dog that violates the building rules. Is that true? Samuel looked up. His eyes were watery, cloudy with age, but there was a spark in them. It's not just a dog, Your Honor, he whispered. His name is Buster. He's 15 years old. He's blind in one eye. He doesn't bark, he just sleeps. Hale cut in sharp and loud. Doesn't matter if it's a dog or a hamster. The lease says no pets. He signed the new lease when I took over. Breach of contract, simple law. I didn't sign it, Samuel said, his voice trembling. I told your manager I couldn't read the small print. He said just sign it so I could keep my heat on. He didn't tell me about Buster. Hale laughed. It was a short, dry bark of a laugh. Ignorance isn't a defense, Judge. He signed it. The dog goes or he goes. And since he refused to remove the animal by the deadline, the sheriff is scheduled to lock him out tomorrow at noon. I looked at the calendar. Tomorrow, Mr. Hale, the forecast for tomorrow is 15 degrees. We are in the middle of a blizzard warning. Hale shrugged. That same gesture he used when he walked in. The gesture of a man who has never been cold in his life. Like I said, Judge, that's unfortunate, but business is business. If he wants to keep the dog, he can go to a shelter. I have tenants paying $3,000 a month moving into the second floor. I need that unit gutted. Gutted, I repeated. The word hung in the air. He wasn't talking about a building. He was talking about a man's home, a man's life. I looked at Samuel. Mr. Carter, do you have family? Do you have somewhere to go? Samuel looked down at his plastic bag. He reached inside and pulled out something that wasn't a legal document. It was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. He held it with both hands to stop the shaking. I don't have family, Your Honor, Samuel said softly. Everyone is gone. My wife passed in '98. My son didn't come back from overseas. Buster is all I have. If I go to a shelter, they'll put him down. He's too old to be adopted. He looked up at me and a tear tracked through the deep lines on his face. I promised him I wouldn't leave him behind. I promised.